Hi guys, yeah, it's been a while since I put a video up. I meant to put this out a lot sooner, but I've been having a little bit of troubles making it for some reason. Ever since my video card switch up and installing the beta drivers for AMD ATI, things have been a little bit sketchy and I've been troubleshooting that a bit. Yeah, I guess it's been a rough transition, not as smooth as I would have liked, but yeah, we're getting there. It's okay. So anyway, yeah, I got my virtual machine up. This is the Debian installation we worked on prior, and so I guess my original take on this video, I had like everything all rolled into one. I went through the entire, Firefox and IP tables and all that stuff, and video clocked in at like over an hour, so I decided it might be best to split it up into multiple videos. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to end up going a little bit more in depth with each one, and I'm probably going to add in some additional content that you wouldn't have otherwise gotten. So I guess it's for the best. So in the first one, I'm going to talk primarily about hardening Firefox and some different techniques you can use to really just improve Firefox's settings. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth with the about config settings, and I'll explain what that is as I get there, I guess. And then for the second video, I'll probably touch on IP tables and give you some basics on how to set that up and how to make it survive a reboot and all that good stuff. And then for the third video, I'm probably going to work with AppArmor a bit. And so that should be interesting to say the least. I'm myself am fairly new to it, but just working with the tutorials and reading up on it a lot, I've managed to get my browser, my personal browser that I use on my primary machine, set up with AppArmor, and it works pretty well. So I'll probably show you guys sort of what I've learned, and hopefully, somebody out there can take that experience and run with it. So without further, rambling here, I'm going to go ahead and pop open Firefox. Now, you're probably going to notice that there are some things that have already been sort of done, and that's probably because of some prior takes on the video. So if you end up seeing something, you're like, well, he's already got that configured. Well, yeah, it's because I did a different take and I just didn't undo all the settings, so that's why. But for the most part, I haven't gone beyond this particular video yet, so you're still caught up if you're following along the tutorial for the most part. So the good news is since trying to record the prior tutorial, several attempts at doing it and me hating it and redoing it, the new Firefox version has come out, and in the last video I briefly described how to update the browser, but I never actually showed you how to do it because at the time we had the newest one. So I'll show you guys briefly how to upgrade this to the newest version, because that is a humongous thing with security, is keeping your system patched and up to date. So we're just going to go down to firefox.com and we're going to download, this is the 64-bit version, so we're just going to grab that, save that to our downloads directory. And again, to determine whether or not you have a 64-bit, you just hop over into your terminal. The easiest way to do this is to hop over into your terminal, which is in accessories there. And if you just do U, name, and then -R, you'll see here at the end it says AMD 64. That means I'm running a 64-bit kernel. So that should tell you exactly what it is. And you can see here I've got some updates to do since I ran this virtual machine before. So yeah, I'm going to skip that for now because we're not worried about that. We're not talking about that. So if you have that come up, just run the update and you should be good to go. So yeah, I don't know why I closed that terminal. We kind of need it, or at least we need a terminal. So yeah, go ahead and open a terminal up if you don't already have one. And what we're going to do is we're just going to cd into our change directory, cd into our downloads, which is where our new Firefox will be. And here it is. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to issue a very simple command, sudo. Wow, I say simple, haha. A lot of you guys out there, if you're new to Linux, might not like this too much, but it's not too bad. So tar, And this is a BZ2, so you want to do X, V, F, and then J, like that. J, lowercase j, is for BZ2. So, yeah. And so now we want to just issue the Firefox 3.1 command, or 3.1 file. And we want to do a dash and a capital C, and we're going to point at it, opt. And actually, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. That's where we want to put it, in opt. Now, I happen to know that Firefox is not a tar bomb, meaning Firefox is not going to extract directly to opt. It's going to create a subfolder in opt called Firefox. So your actual Firefox executable will be opt, and then Firefox, and then Firefox. The second Firefox being the actual executable. So you can see here it's actually telling me it has an update. So we're just going to tell it to ask later. We don't need to worry about that. We're doing it the good old-fashioned way here. Okay, so once you have that done, just hit enter and of course elevate yourself. Let's see if I can not fat finger my password here, and you'll see it copy in the files. And once that's done, you should get returned to a standard prompt again, and we do. So then what you're going to do is just kill your Firefox browser if it's open, and then simply relaunch your Firefox browser. And you'll see it check the add-ons and pop open. And now you'll have, if you go to the help menu and then about, you'll see that you're running the newest Firefox and that it's already up to date. It's checked, so that's good. And yeah, that's awesome. Let's double check our add-ons. So our plugins are all there. We have the integration that came with the system, if you followed from our last video. Yeah, we've got the GNOME Shell integration and the iTunes application detector, which is actually from, I think, Banshee. And then we have the Java that we installed, the Shockwave Flash that we installed, and the Silverlight plugin that we installed via Pipelight. So if you haven't watched that video, you might want to take a look at it and get your plugins to look like this. This is for full functionality. Now, if you're bent on free software, if that's your goal, to run a completely free software machine, you don't want these plugins because they're not free. They're proprietary, every single one of them. So, well, except for maybe these two. But yeah, these down here are definitely proprietary. So, extensions. This is part of the hardening process, I guess, would be to install some good security extensions. And these are kind of the ones that I generally would recommend. So from the top, we have Cookie Monster. Cookie Monster is basically for managing, well, cookies. It's pretty self-explanatory, I think. So what that is if you go to like a website, say Bing, for instance, bing.com, we'll use that one. You could use Google, or it doesn't really matter. Anyway, so Cookie Monster. Cookie Monster will show you your options for cookies. Now you can see here that our default action is rejected. I don't think it's like that by default, so you might want to go into your options. I think it's no, it's not options. It's where's it at? I thought it was options. Anyway, so if we go back into our add-ons manager and then look at Cookie Monster and do preferences, you can see here, yeah. So make sure that's checked and you'll get a whitelist kind of capability. At the very least, I would recommend checking this one. So you have block all third-party cookies checked. But I prefer to run a whitelist. Now the difference, or the problem with running a whitelist is it can be annoying, and that's kind of the balance between security. You know, security is always a balancing act. It's a balancing act between security itself, the idea of being secure, and being, you know, convenient, having the convenience. Okay, so when you run a whitelist like this, it's more secure, but it's highly inconvenient because every website you go to that is not, I guess, a website that you've been to in the past, because you're running a whitelist, you're going to have to configure it every single time. And for some users, that's just, you know, it's too much to handle, it's annoying or whatever, and you don't want to do it. So that's the balance you're going to have to strike. You need to figure out what you're comfortable with and where your priorities lie as far as security is concerned. So of course, everything that I say in the vast majority of these videos is all opinions, and it's 98% optional. You don't have to follow my tutorial word for word in order to have a working system. If you follow my tutorials word for word, generally you'll get a system that is what I would consider acceptable. But just because I consider it to be acceptable doesn't mean it is necessarily as secure as it could potentially be, nor does it mean that it is set up to be as convenient as you might like it to be. So you've got to figure out kind of where you want to be and what you think you need and what's best for the environment you're using. So use a little bit of common sense and do a little extra reading, and you should get yourself there pretty reasonably. So my videos are just there to give you a general guide, I guess, through this sort of stuff. So take everything I say with a grain of salt, kind of do your own research and figure out, what works best for you. Don't just take everything I say at face value. But Cookie Monster, to get back on topic, is a great tool. Essentially, it just blocks all cookies. It's basic level. That's what it does. So if you try to log into a website, it blocks everything. From happening. So the default action is rejected, and you can see that that's the one that's highlighted. So what that means right now is if I try to log into this website, or if I give it some information that it would normally store or remember in a cookie, it's not going to remember that information. I cannot log in right now. I can't do anything. And so if I wanted to enable myself to be able to log in, I would accept session cookies. Session cookies are cookies that create a session. It's pretty self-explanatory, really. Anyway, they create a session, and it allows you to basically log in. It stores all your session data, so you can kind of log in and still work. That doesn't necessarily mean you'll be able to do absolutely everything, but most times that's enough, and that's a good thing, because if the site has some sort of tracking mechanism or some other kind of cookie, you can tell it you don't want to accept that. But if you do need further capabilities, you can always accept cookies from the actual site, which accepts all cookies from the site but not third parties, which is very important because third-party cookies are where a lot of your trackers come from. So that is sort of how Cookie Monster works. Now, the reason I like Cookie Monster as opposed to other ones is Cookie Monster is much more granular. You can get in there and fine-tune it, on a per-site basis. Most of them is like, okay, I want to enable cookies globally, or I want to disable cookies globally, and that's basically where it's at. It doesn't give you a full granular manager the way Cookie Monster really does them. That's why I like Cookie Monster and sort of prefer it. It doesn't mean it's the best tool out there. It's just the best one that I found for me. So, again, grain of salt, right? So the next one on our list, and I'll just do this kind of from the top to bottom, is Ghostry. And Ghostry is a blacklist kind of a situation, and it basically filters out based on a list of known trackers and bad stuff, I guess. Sort of works as like a backup to Cookie Monster in a way, because it primarily focuses on cookies. So if we go to preferences, you can see in here, let's see, yeah, down here. So you have trackers, so that's your trackers that you can block, and then you have cookies, and you can block cookies. Now widgets are normally like, I guess, page functionality like social network buttons or comment sections and things of that nature. So you can determine for yourself if you want or need those blocked. And there is another thing that I would recommend. Alert bubble I normally get rid of. Yeah, so just read through and make sure you understand sort of what these are and disable what you want. So you can tell it to delete flash and silverlight cookies on exit. I was running that for a while, but I kind of determined that once you select that box, that YouTube will act up. So certain websites that use flash and silverlight will kind of act funny if you do that for some reason, which your results may vary. I don't know if your results will be the same as mine were on that. But yeah, it's a pretty great tool. So I do recommend it, especially for people who are newer, because it gives you sort of like a baseline setup of protection. So the next one on the list is NoScript. And NoScript is, it's extra protection for Firefox. It allows JavaScript only for trusted domains of your choice. which is basically exactly what that line says there. Now, the important thing about that is it's also a whitelist tool. So, for instance, if I go to Bing.com here, and this is why I chose Bing.com, because it's obvious, right, if it's working or not, because there's normally a gigantic background image here. And that's all controlled through JavaScript. And so when JavaScript is not working, this is what you get. So if I go over here and I turn on temporarily allow Bing.com, you'll notice that the background image starts working. And you can now interact with the site in a sort of a better way, I guess. Now, let's actually, no thanks to that. I have a home page that I like much better. Anyway, so as you can see, yeah, that's what NoScript kind of does. It gives you the interactability with the site. Now here, there's this video control you can enable. I think that's NoScript that actually is doing that. So that's where you get your site in full, real view, I guess. And so, yeah, it's kind of nice. And you can control that in a granular way. And if you use the temporary one, the cool thing about the temporary is you can come down here and you can say make temporary permanent, or you can temporarily allow all scripts on the page. I recommend avoiding that if you can. Allow all in this page permanently allows all scripts on the page. I definitely recommend avoiding that if possible. Revoke temporary permissions is nice because if you set your temporary permissions up to try and get certain features of a website working without enabling nasty trackers or whatever, and you kind of decide, well, I can't really get it working without enabling some really bad stuff, so I just want to disable everything again, you can do revoke temporary permissions, and you can see the site returns back to its gray former self because it no longer has any permissions. So you can see that with NoScript on, and when it's blocking everything, it limits the functionality of the website quite substantially. But it gets rid of drive-by scripts and things that can download stuff onto your computer. A lot of drive-by ads that do that. This is also great for ad blocking if you're into that kind of thing, which I think most people are these days. Yeah, so it's all around. It's a pretty useful plugin. I highly recommend it. It also has other features like you have your whitelist and general features. You can mess with those, I guess. Embeddings. This is like if you have embedded Java, embedded Adobe Flash, Silverlight, whatever. I don't know if this works with Pipelight or not. I assume it does, but I don't know if it does or not, really. I couldn't say for sure because Pipelight's kind of a hack. But yeah, you can definitely forbid everything if you want. Personally, I normally just take the defaults here because I think that the forbidding all iframes and all WebGL and everything's a bit of overkill and will probably drive you crazy. It's a little bit too inconvenient for even me. So, you'll have to feel it out, see what you want to see. So, you can also set your appearance up, of course, your notification, how it notifies you. And in here you can adjust additional settings like your untrusted sites, additional restrictions for untrusted sites, additional permissions for trusted sites, cross-site scripting protection. Here you can set up rules. I'm not really going to go into the details on that. If you want, you can do some additional reading, search that out. Find they have an XSS FAQ right here. You can click on that link and probably get some additional reading for it there. This is the HTTPS. You can force certain sites to use encrypted cookies, and you can force sites to use an HTTPS connection. And you can also say force active web content unless it comes from forbid active web content unless it comes from a secure source, secure HTTPS connection. So that's kind of an interesting setting to play with. I think that for a lot of new users that might be a bit much. There's also application boundary enforcement. All this stuff is sort of extra, but you can read up on it. And normally I just take all the defaults and I don't worry about it too much. Though I do tend to add some stuff in here, but it's sort of a bit much to cover in this single video. I got a lot of material I want to get out of the way, so I'll just point you guys at these facts here and leave you to work that one out. But the default setting should be pretty adequate for most people, I think, unless you're just like really paranoid. But yeah, so that's NoScript. NoScript I highly recommend. Very, very good tool. Smart Video for YouTube is just kind of a convenience thing. If you're curious about it, I'll show it to you since it's on the list. Basically, it does this stuff, right? So you have this is the YouTube page, and this is embedded videos that are not on YouTube pages. And I like it for this because if you've ever seen like a website that had like 10 or 15 embedded videos and they all started playing at once and it drove you crazy, you can enable this where it's start playing when buffered, don't play, only notify, and then here ensure all videos are buffered even if they are paused is really cool. Save bandwidth, don't initialize video until I click. That's a huge one, especially if you're on a metered data connection, and hopefully you're not because that's terrible. But if you are, that is a nice option right there, especially on sites that embed lots and lots of videos. And I check it specifically, even though I have an unlimited connection on pretty much everything. I check that setting anyway, just because I don't want all these videos initializing at the same time. It just creates a big mess. It's annoying. So, but on the YouTube side, if it's a YouTube video, generally there's not more than one embedded, so I don't need to worry about the save bandwidth, don't initialize until I click thing. I do use Smart Buffer, but I let it play as soon as it gets to the point where it feels like it's not going to skip anymore. You can also set your your quality level if you want to go to HD or whatever, and hide annotations by default, which is really great. If you don't feel like logging in every single time you want to go to YouTube. And you can also set your player size by default, and control playlists and such. So it's a pretty nice tool. I just wanted to touch it since it was there on the list, and people are probably going to ask questions about it if they're curious. So that way, you don't have to worry about it. User agent quick switch I covered in the last video I did. It's basically just a user agent string switcher, and I like it better than the others because for my purposes I don't need the others because I don't switch user agent strings very often. But in the case of the Linux web browser where I have the pipeline enabled and everything, and I want to watch Netflix videos, user agent quick switch is pretty decent because when you click it, you click it once and it's on. You click it like that and it's normal. You click it like that and it's Linux, or one of the two. I can't remember which color switch anymore. It's in my prior video though. There's a little slide in there or whatever that shows you which color is which. So yeah, anyway, you can go to Netflix, and if it's not working, click that, and there you have it. And if you right click it, you can enter your string in there. And I covered all that in the prior video, so I'm not going to go talking about that one too much. So that's the plugins generally. And if you want to know how to get some of these plugins, let's see, go back into add-ons here, and then you do search. So there's a couple of really good ones that I don't have on here. There is HTTPS everywhere, and I don't know if it'll find it. Maybe it will. It doesn't look like it. But if you go to this web search and just do HTTPS everywhere, it's a plugin you can get from the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And what it does is it tries to ensure that every website you go to uses HTTPS if it's available. And that's a very good thing because HTTPS is encryption, so it's good for privacy. So yeah, EFF is actually really great. They make a lot of really decent, sort of software for privacy and such. So definitely check into the EFF if you're concerned about privacy. They make another really good one called Privacy Badger. There's it in there, Badger. Yeah, this guy here. And it's sort of like, I guess, Ghostry. It's similar in nature to Ghostry. But it doesn't really replace Ghostry, I guess. I don't really know exactly what the deal is with it. But they have this lovely little fact here, which will probably tell you a little bit about... Well, it does tell you a little bit about it. And, what they're trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish. The only thing about Privacy Badger is it's sort of, it's not quite, I think it's still beta. Yeah, it's beta, so, it might not be perfect just yet. But that's another really sort of decent one to have. And there, of course, are many, many, many more plugins that you can check into. Of course, you can always use this to search for them, and you can find a lot of neat sort of plugins out there that will help you secure your system even more. Of course, do your research on them, because there are some out there that are kind of nasty and don't work as well, or they actually install nasty software or whatever that comes down with them. So definitely read reviews on plugins and read up on plugins, and know what you're installing before you install it, as with any piece of software, right? So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look into about.config, because there's a couple of things I can point out in here, or about :config, I guess. If I do just like that. Alright, so what you should know about this is where you find a lot of hidden settings for your browser. Okay, so if you have like settings that you can't find in the menu or something because there's no GUI element for that particular setting, you can change it here. And if you double click, like on the Boolean ones like this that are true and false, if you double click, it'll just switch them like that. And if you have it one that's set to a value that isn't what its default is, for instance, if I change that value, you can actually right click on it and then hit reset, and it'll pop it back over to its default value. So you don't have to worry too much about breaking things, but definitely do be careful and understand what you're getting yourself into when you do some of this stuff, because if you set the wrong settings in here, you can slow your browser to a crawl, or you can even make your browser, not start. All kinds of weird stuff. Who knows? So there's a few things you can do here. If you're really paranoid, one of the things you can do is, if you don't like your browser caching files to your drive, and instead you'd prefer to do it to your RAM so that it's not caching anything permanently. Let's see, you can do browser, and then dot, I think, cache. Yeah, here you go. So browser cache disk enable is one. If you set that to false, it will eliminate that. It won't cache to the disk anymore. And there's also a disk cache SSL one that you can set to false, and that won't eliminate that. However, you need to be aware that by disabling caching, you also disable things like, I think, history and no, not history, it's session restore. Well, actually, yeah, your history won't survive a reboot either, I don't think, of the browser. But mainly it's the session restore feature. So if you like how Firefox pops your tabs back up when you reboot it, or when you restart Firefox, you may want to ignore that and not disable those things. But yeah, so a few other things you can do is you can set your browser disk cache capacity. I think that's in here somewhere. Yeah, if you set that to 0, it will also disable it. If you're using a proxy, and you want Firefox to perform DNS requests through the proxy, what you can do is you can use network.proxy socks remote DNS. Set that to true, and it will make it perform DNS requests over a proxy. Now, that has implications, so be aware. There are implications to doing that, I suppose. If there are nefarious DNS machines out there on the proxy server, then it can cause weird stuff. So make sure you trust the proxy you're going through if you want to use DNS requests over the proxy. There's a reason why that's disabled by default. So yeah, geolocation is another one. So if you don't want geo enabled, so this is like if websites request your location, Firefox can send your approximate location to the website so it knows where you're at without asking you any questions. There are a lot of people who have problems with that, so if you just double click that and make it false, Firefox will no longer send that information. Be aware though, mapping apps and such will no longer be able to automatically grab your information. They're going to have to query you for it, and if they're not set up to do so, then they might not work. So All of these settings have implications to both convenience and usability, so be careful. The other one is if you want websites to not know where you've come from. One of the setting you can use for that is network HTTP send refer header. So this guy here, if you set that to 0, then it will not send the referral header. Note that if you're using Linux and you want to download, or Windows for that matter, and you want to download the newest Linux or newest drivers for your video card, or really any drivers on AMD site, it's not going to work because of this setting. So if you set this to 0, it will break the AMD website. Well, they artificially break it, actually. If you're not sending a referrer header, they will actively block you from accessing their site or accessing their downloads. So just be aware that that's the case. So yeah, all of these definitely have, you know, I guess downsides. Another one that's interesting is browser session history. So max entries. This is how many entries can be in your session history. So whenever you're browsing sites and collecting history, that's how many maximum ones you can have. Network prefetching you can use as well. So if you don't like network prefetching, you can disable that. It's network.prefetch. Next, yeah, this right here. Firefox uses this to speed up browsing by prefetching data from the next pages on sites. You can disable that functionality if you care to. So, of course, that has implications. It's a speed thing, but then it's not grabbing stuff from sites you haven't even clicked on yet. So yeah, that's kind of a interesting bit. All right, so that I guess that kind of wraps it up. There's a few other little obscure things in here, I think. Let's see, what was some other ones I had? There was NTLM, I think that's it. Yeah, this guy here. Okay, so if you have been using a SharePoint site, a Microsoft SharePoint site, and that SharePoint site quit working, and you're using, since you've upgraded to Firefox 30 and above, it is because this setting is now false by default. If you change it back to true, like so, your SharePoint site will work again. However, note that this particular setting is less secure. NTLM version 1 is, well, sucks. So it's probably not the best idea to turn that on if you don't need it. If you're on a Windows machine, NTLM version 2 gets used as a preference over NTLM version 1. However, Linux machines don't tend to support NTLM version 2. It's a Microsoft technology, so it is what it is. And if that's the case, then you will be out of luck if the SharePoint administrator does not enable an alternative encryption method that your browser will support. So you'll need to fall back to NTLM version 1. So that's important too. Okay, so here's a few more other things we can do in the preferences here. In privacy, I always tell sites that they do not want to be tracked. I suggest you do the same. It doesn't really mean a whole lot, but I suggest you do the same. Yeah, so the history, I always use custom settings, and I tell it to use private browsing mode. I don't always check that. I don't want it to always use that mode because that mode tends to disable your plugins, and my plugins are very pretty and I like them, so no. I always uncheck accept cookies from sites as well, and manage it with Cookie Monster. And then, remember search and form history. You can uncheck that if you don't want it to remember history. And of course, browsing and download history, you can uncheck that if you want to cover your tracks there as well. This is also a good idea if you're paranoid about history, but you want to use it while you're actually using it, And you can also set where your location bar looks when it's looking for suggestions. In security, the defaults are probably good enough. There's really not a whole lot you can mess with in here. A lot of people like to use a master password. Personally, I don't tend to like letting applications remember my passwords. So, yeah, no. Sync, use at your discretion. That's up to you. However you want to work it. I used to use it, then they switched to the newer system. Now I'm waiting on, to set up my own personal sync server if possible. I disable all the reporting. I don't like people to get reports on stuff that comes from my computer. It just bothers me, but whatever you're comfortable with. So check for updates, but let me choose whether to install them is probably a good idea, so it reminds you about the update, but then doesn't try to install it. Because, by the way we've installed Firefox, I think I said this in the prior video, the way we've installed Firefox, if you try to install it, it's not going to work via this automatic thing. You'll actually need to do the download method and then extract it yourself. And certificates, there's really not a whole lot to mention here. It's a general certificate manager. If you know what that is, then you can play with it and use it. I will say if you have a smart card reader, this is where you go to get it working, right in here in security devices. So if you have a smart card reader, that's what you want to look at, security devices, and then you can set your certificates up for it or whatever. But yeah, so that's how that works. So that's pretty much it, I think, with Firefox, at least on the general talk for it. I guess if there's anything else I can really say about it is, make security important to you. Don't ignore it. A lot of people, they huff and fight me on setting lengthy passwords and like I don't have to log in every single time, do I, or whatever. And I think that's silly. I think that we're only as secure as our weakest link, and if our weakest link is the guy over there huffing because he's got to choose a password, that's not a good sign. So definitely don't be that guy. Take security seriously. Try to read up on it, learn about it. One of the most important, I think, lessons that we can take from this is no amount of security can save you from yourself. So everything I just showed you is only going to matter if you're willing to implement it, understand it, then implement what's important to you and stick to it. Okay, if you go and you whitelist every single site to have all the functionality, and you don't bother to not whitelist sites that are evil, because every time you need functionality, you're like, well, I need the functionality, so I'm just going to whitelist everything. And well, in that case, you might as well just uninstall all the plugins and just have your browser all natural, because you're not doing yourself any favors. The security's there to protect you. If you're going to disable it every time it gets inconvenient, then obviously it's not going to protect you. So why have it? It's inconvenient and it's not really serving a purpose. So get rid of it, right? So I think that's the biggest lesson. I think the number one place that security breaches come from are users, people. Not the computers themselves, but the people. The people didn't read and understand the warning banner. They didn't read the license agreement when they installed it, and it said plainly in the license agreement it was going to install 40 gigs of malware with the application you requested, but you just clicked accept because you wanted the application you requested, and who likes reading? That's why security breaches happen. People don't pay attention, they don't read. If the virus scanner pop-up looks, nefarious, doesn't look like the virus scanner pop-ups you normally get from your virus scanner, chances are it's evil, and you probably shouldn't accept whatever it has to offer. You should probably uninstall or try to remove whatever it is that's generating that pop-up. All too often I've seen people tell me their virus was infected with hundreds of nefarious evil applications, and really it was the virus scanner that was evil in the first place, and everything else was just a fabrication. So it's important to know your system, to know what a real pop-up looks like, a real security warning looks like. It's important to know what your system is telling you, to understand what it's saying, to understand what's good, what's bad. Read up on it, look into it. A lot of people don't want to be bothered. They can't be bothered with it, and I think that's pretty sad, you know? I mean, I'm the kind of person where I can't drive a car without trying to figure out how it works. I can't operate something and not have some basic understanding, at least, of how it works. I have to know, you know, that how something works. But you don't have to know on a, you know, a minuscule level. You can understand it on a macro level. You know, just have a basic understanding of your security tools. Know when something's fake, you know, and exercise good practices on the internet. Biggest thing you can do is train yourself, and I think that's important to understand, because that's where your security breach is. It's in your own skill and your own ability to read and understand things. There is no magic fix. You can't just install Linux and assume you're secure. If you went out and bought a Mac and said, well, I'm secure now, you're part of the problem. And you need to resolve it by learning about this stuff and taking it seriously. So hopefully this video, you know, helps people move in the right direction. Hopefully the next two videos will do the same. This one is a little bit more novice friendly, I hope, especially in the beginning with just the plugins. Those are the easy things. You know, you really don't have to go into the about config to lock your system down or to secure it a little bit better at least. But you definitely should probably look into some of the plugins I mentioned. At the very least, just be aware that that stuff is out there to help you, and if you want to take advantage of it, it's all free. You know, you just download it and use it. So there's no excuse to really not, except for the fact that it's inconvenient. And it's only inconvenient if, you know, you're unwilling to put the effort into making it work for you. A lot of people say, well, I like out-of-the-box solutions that work, you know, right off the bat, and I don't have to do anything to make it work. And I say I'd rather work harder and get a better solution than work with something out of the box that's generic and cookie cutter and doesn't work in all situations. You know, that's just me. I'd rather put in the effort and have a better product, have a better experience with, you know, with the hard work I put into it. If it's got a learning curve, then the answer is simple: learn. So, yeah. So that's it for this video. I think the next video I'll probably do the IP tables one, and I'll probably end up saving the AppArmor one for last. So just because it's the one that's newest to me, and I'd probably like some time to muck around with it a bit and get to know it a bit better before I go try making a video on it. Whatever one I do make, it'll be probably you know, just a gloss over. It's not going to be some in-depth, huge. This is, you know, every single aspect of it. I probably won't do that with any of my videos, because I do consider myself somewhat of an expert on the whole Linux, Debian especially, kind of genre thing, I guess. But I'm not going to say that I'm the end-all, be-all of it, you know. I'm sure there are people out there who would do things differently than me, and that's okay. But this is my perspective on it, and I hope that it helps people. So, with that, yeah, good luck, be secure, and have fun.